Okay, welcome to the video. SIG Guy here. Does just replacing the sear springs alone in your SIG Sauer P320 make that much of a difference? Well, let's find out. Okay, so we have the P320 AXG Legion all set up in the trigger scan. It is clear, it is safe. I've already pulled the trigger a million times, and that is your very first step when doing anything with firearms, okay? And I also recommend that changing any springs like this or tuning a pistol should be done by a qualified gunsmith, and it should be brought to the range afterwards and verified that it's 100% reliable and safe after making any changes to your firearms, okay? So we have the ISMI springs today. They have the OEM ones, minus 10% load, minus 25% load, and minus 50% load. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the trigger with the factory sear springs in it. We're going to graph that data, and then we'll start changing out these springs, and we'll compare the results between these springs and OEM so you know realistically what to expect if you're going to replace these springs. So let's get started. Okay, so I'd also like to add that this AXG is completely factory. Everything is stock. That way, when I make any changes to it, realistically, you know how it's gonna affect yours. If yours is stock, if I had like a different trigger in this, like the Armory Craft trigger, that would affect my trigger pull weight compared to yours if you don't have the Armory Craft trigger in it as well. Okay, so let's do a trigger pull on this so we can get a kind of a baseline. So let's go over the graph really quick. We have basically our data in three different spots. We have a table up here, we have the line graph itself, and then we have each individual component down here. And the way our graph works is we got our travel. Anything going this direction is the distance our trigger traveled, and anything going this way is the force or the amount of trigger pull weight, okay? So we have our peak force down here. That's our trigger pull weight. We have our initial take up. We have our over travel, and then for the competitive shooters, this is pretty important, the lock time, which is 3.30 milliseconds. So for those of you that have not seen any of these graphs yet, basically from here to here is all of our initial take up or our pre-travel. So this is where your wall starts, and you got your wall, and then your creep and everything, and then your break is right here. So anything from here to here, this is our over travel. Okay, from here to here, these two dots, this in here is our lock time. Okay, and then from here to here is our trigger pull weight. Okay, so again, nothing too exciting here. And then up here, we got the same data in the table, or trigger pull number one, and then the each individual readings. Okay, so we'll do another one with the minus 50% ISMI springs. That'll be the most dramatic difference. That'll put a number 2 here, and then the relevant data with that one there. So let's get them other sear springs installed and do another trigger pull. All right, for our sear springs, you really don't need to disassemble this whole thing. But you do need to take your trigger bar up and out of there. And I usually just pull this all out because it's going to fall off anyway. Just as long as you get that trigger bar out from in where it interacts with our sear, that's enough. And then our safety lever pivot pin, we got to get that out of there. Okay. And if you need a slower, more detailed video, any of my FCU complete disassembly and reassembly videos will work, okay? And then our takedown safety, we just need to pull that out a little bit because that goes in between the legs on our sear. So I just pulled it out just a little bit. If you pull it out too far, then you got to take the whole thing out because the spring's got to go behind it. But then I can pull that up and out of there. We can remove those sear springs. So make sure you keep track of these, because if you drop one next to the other, you're probably not going to know which is which. And then I'll put the ISMI -50 on that side. And if these don't stay put, you can use a little dab of grease on them posts. They'll act like glue. Keep those on there for you. Oops. Let me get this started here. So my safety lever pop back in. Get those down in there. Put our safety lever pivot pin back in. There you go, that's lined up. Take down safety levers back in. And all we got left to do is put our trigger bar back on. And our trigger bar spring. Oops. Just like that. Alright, so we'll get this all set up on the trigger scan, and we will do another trigger pull and graph the data. Okay, so let's take a look at our graph now. It's a little bit more exciting, and it's pretty interesting. We have something to compare it to here. So again, our factory SIG springs and our ISMI springs is the orange line. We'll take a look down here first. Our trigger pull weight has been dramatically decreased. You're talking 0.872, so just over 3/4 of a pound lighter trigger pull weight. We did give up a little bit of take up, okay, our pre-travel, and it's actually the whole trigger pull itself has been decreased, even though we got a little bit here. And 0.002, you're not even going to feel that. This is the difference between those two numbers right here. This little bit right in between there, you're not even going to feel that, okay? So we gained a lot here. We gave up a tiny bit here. And the same thing on our over travel. We're giving up a tiny bit there as well. Our lock time, pretty dramatic as far as lock time readings go. 0.20 milliseconds for the competitive shooters. You'll be able to shoot a lot faster. All right, so let me explain our graph. Our orange one is more this way and more this way compared to our blue line, okay? So that means our ISMI trigger now, with the trigger springs in there, or excuse me, our sear springs, is a shorter trigger pull overall and a lighter trigger pull. The reason why we gave up here and we gave up, on our initial take up, even though those increased, it's shorter from here to here. So if you can see that section of the orange line, which this is our wall and our creep and everything right before our break, that has been decreased compared to here and here on the blue line. Okay, so even though we got a little bit on the over travel and a little bit on the pre-travel, we reduced length in this section here. So overall, it's a shorter trigger and it's a lot lighter. So this is our 4-pound line. This is our 2-pound line. So that's pretty significant when you can decrease over 3/4 of a pound just by changing those two springs. And then if we wanted to put maybe a lighter trigger bar spring in there, we can get down into here. We put a different trigger in it that has reduced, like a lot of them are -20% now. We can get down to there. I mean, there's other triggers out there and other combinations. You can get right down to anywhere in here that you want. So not everybody likes a lighter trigger. Maybe they want a heavier trigger. Well, you can put heavier springs in there and bring this line, up here versus down here. So that's the difference right there with our -50. And again, here's our factory. Here's our ISMI. And then the corresponding numbers associated with those trigger pulls. So that's pretty interesting. For a couple pennies, basically, you can get these kind of results in your 320. So let me change out to the -25 we'll do, and we'll see kind of where in here that graphs as well. All right, so let's look at this graph. The purple is the minus 25, the blue is the OEM, and the orange is the minus 50. And I'm learning a lot with this trigger scan. There's things that I never would have thought of or known was happening had it not been for the trigger scan data. And I mean, honestly, I expected the weight to be decreased, as we talked about in the last clip on this video. I mean, it is right in this area here, in between these two, so that's no surprise. But I'm surprised about how much it extends this way. You know, I expected it to fall right down in between these lines here. So let's take a look at the data and see what the increase actually is. So our trigger pull weight, no surprise there. Kind of falls right in between these two here, as this is OEM and this is minus 50. Our initial take up, once again, we just increased 0.002. Again, we're talking from here to here to here. All of this is the amount we sacrificed by gaining all of this, this is irrelevant. This stuff right in here. And then our over travel, surprisingly, decreased a little bit. So we're actually in below our OEM. So why is it so much longer? Well, let's take a look at that. Again, our difference is from here to here. Okay. This distance right in here is where all this added length came from. Even though we decreased over here and we gained a little bit over here. So my wall and then my creep and everything has been increased with these minus 25% springs. Why, I don't know. If anybody else knows, that'd be great. Put it in the comments so we can all learn something. Lock time basically didn't change much at all. Same between those two right there. Even though the dots look like they're quite a bit different distance, for whatever reason, the data is exactly the same. And then once again up here, we got all our OEM, minus 50, minus 25. If you like to look at the data that way, you can see how it relates to the other readings. So I'm really interested to see what these minus 10%, I mean, is it going to be up here and then come down here? Let's put them in and find out. All right, so we got our minus 10, and little surprised. I actually expected this to be just a little bit lower than this, but it's just a tick higher. But I don't know who makes SIG's springs, if they make them in-house or they sub them out to some other company. But ISMI, you can see, is negative 50, negative 25, negative 10. It's right in line with the springs are consecutive based on their ratings, you know what I'm saying, on the packaging. So one interesting thing about this whole line is this guy right here. I have no idea what's going on there. You can see the first two springs are perfectly straight, and then we got a little flyer here on our minus, that one was our minus 25, and then we got really erratic here with our minus 10. So that's, if anybody knows what this is as well, I'm going to reach out to a couple people and see if they have an understand what's going on. But let's look at the data here a little closer. I mean, 5.5 was our OEM. We're at 5.7, so we increased a little bit. This here, excuse me, not that there. This here, it's right in line with the other numbers that we had. We're giving up a little bit. Gave up a little bit here again. And then our lock time has been pretty consistent throughout. So one thing I really didn't discuss here is our travel to actuate, okay? And that's where I'm seeing a lot of our changes here, depending on which springs we have. Travel to actuate is from the very beginning over here to where the brake is, okay? So all this distance here on that one is our travel to actuate, okay? So as we increased from here to here relative to this one and this one, our travel to actuate grew, okay, which you can see, which you can see down here, it increased 220 from 215, and then it was 200, and then it was 198. So as you can see, as these springs we're putting them in there, our travel to actuate is increasing, even though our pre-travel is pretty much staying the same. Okay, so all, like I said, and even our wall is like all right in here, kind of. So from here to here is our creep. That's where all this change is happening. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put my minus 50s back in there. And then I'm going to use their minus 20 trigger bar spring. And we're going to see how much more it comes down in here. Okay. Just so you guys have an idea. And I'll do a whole new video on trigger bar springs. But I'm very curious as to how low we can get it with just changing those 3 springs in the P320. All right, and there you have it. Here's our minus 50 sear springs with minus 20 trigger bar spring compared to just the 50 sear springs there. So it's pretty significant trigger pull difference. If you look at the numbers down here, we were at 4.6 with just the 50% sear springs, and we dropped it down to 4.1 by adding the minus 20% trigger bar spring. So about a half a pound difference, which is pretty significant for changing out one little spring again. So there you go. I hope you like this type of video. Basically, all the different sear springs, I mean, how they relate to each other. It's very helpful to see it on a graph. It's very hard to feel all the time what's going on, especially from such a very small spring. And you can continue to drop this thing down by changing out other springs in the 320. And I'm not advocating for lighter triggers better. Just showing people the differences that these parts make in your SIG Sauer. Because you can go the other way as well. You can put stiffer springs in there as well if you want a heavier trigger pull. Okay, this stuff in here was very interesting. That's something I learned today. I did not know that that was increasing by changing out these springs. Obviously knew the weight was decreasing, but I had no idea about this data in here, which is pretty cool to learn, and I really want to know what this guy here is all about. So as always, if you guys like this type of video, there'll be a subscribe button right down here in the corner. If you could subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate it. All these springs are available on sigguy.com, as well as many other parts from many other manufacturers, including factory stuff from SIG Sauer themselves. As always, thank you for watching and have a great day.